Hello, my name is Isaac Roberts. I'm a Nordic Studies major at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa.
I'm Libby Bygd. I'm a communications major at Luther College. We are studying return migration in the context of Scandinavian immigration history.
In this podcast, we will be discussing return migration, a topic that is often overlooked when learning about immigration. Shockingly enough, a significant amount of Norwegian immigrants returned to Norway after emigrating to America.
We will tell you about the history of Knut Wefold and include an interview with our guest, Pat Downs, a volunteer guide at Vesterheim Museum in Decorah, Iowa, who talks about why return migration was such a significant part of Norwegian history.
The object we are studying is a drawing of a Minnesota farm by Wefold, who was a return migrant. Before returning to Norway, Wefold drew this image of his home in America. He took this with him as a keepsake, a practice common among return migrants.
Before we discuss return migration and Wefold's story, let's take some time to describe the object itself.
This drawing is handmade and relatively small, only being about 3 by 5 inches. The drawing was done with either colored pencil or crayon on a rectangular yellowish-brown paper. The drawing is composed of many colors, including greens, blues, browns, and oranges, but they are faded.
There's a large hill in the background and a few smaller forested hills in front of that. In these smaller hills, there is a brown church-like building. The midground contains various buildings, all brown and white, a farmhouse, a few sheds, and others.
Also in the midground, there are 2 brown, fenced-in fields and what is likely a haystack. In the foreground, there is a green field. There is a small tear in the bottom left corner and Wefold's signature in the bottom right.
Let's talk a little bit more about Wefold, a return migrant himself.
Being the firstborn son, he had to travel back to Norway to claim the family farm after his father had died in 1900. Wefold had taken his wife Sarah and their 3 sons at the time, Magnus, Harald, and Egil, back to Norway.
To gain more insight into reasons other immigrants might choose to move back, we interviewed Pat Downs, a volunteer guide at Vesterheim, who talks about the Hagen family featured in the museum. Why do you think return migration is commonly ignored as a larger part of the immigration story?
You know, I look at what the Haugen's daughter and son-in-law said, and they said we were unfriendly, and it was too expensive. You know, and I was kind of affronted by that. Why is it ignored? Because I think we like to think that if you work to come here, you would just come and go, what a wonderful country.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you wouldn't want to go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't quite fit the narrative.
It doesn't, and 20 to 25% return.
Yeah.
You know, it's huge, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You just heard Pat Downs sharing her thoughts on why the Haugens, a family featured at the museum, were convinced to move back to Norway. It was too unfriendly and too expensive.
And as she said, return migration is an essential part of the story, and rates were higher than previously thought. A study by the Journal of Development Economics found that the number of Norwegian outmigrants returning was heavily miscalculated. This study estimates the number of outmigrants to be 3 times higher than officially recorded for 1900 to 1910.
And more than 7 times higher for 1910 to 1920.
These migrants returned home for many reasons: success or failure in America,
Homesickness.
or rejection of the life they found.
That rejection of American life could have been influenced by the hostile attitudes that Pat mentioned.
Additionally, some Norwegians intended to return to Norway from the beginning of their journey. These short-term migrations were often quite successful. A study by Cornell University found that Norwegians who spent 5 years in the US were typically better off than those who didn't.
Finally, many people returned to claim family farms in Norway, like Wefold.
Despite return migration not being commonly discussed, it was a significant part of Norwegian immigration history. The journeys of Knut Wefold and the Hagens are just 2 stories within a wide spectrum of immigrants' experiences.
A special thanks to Lauren Gilbertson, the chief curator at Vesterheim, Pat Downs, a volunteer guide at Vesterheim, and our professor Dr. Anna Peterson, associate professor of history at Luther College. Without these people, this exhibit would not have been possible.
And if you are currently at the exhibit, please make sure to check out the other topics done by our amazing classmates.
Thank you.